You know we love music. You know my brother and I, we love music, and we have such a fondness in our hearts for those old school tooth and nail days, man. This is the Lost Chorus, a song called Soft Lies, and you get like an all-star lineup. Folks from Project 86 and Stavesacre, and you know that old school hardcore band, Focused. Man, great music, and you can listen to it anywhere you listen to your music. I've got some in the show notes. There's a little bit more information on this band, a little bit of their background, but we are happy at PWNA to be able to show these guys off. Hitchhiking on a satellite beam. Soft lies, tremble my hair. Oh God, now I'm feeling that. Oh, fear in the warmth of my hand. What's up, everybody? It's Pastor with No Answers. I'm your host, Joey Svendsen. But hopefully you see me more as your friend, that friend you listen to every now and then, laugh at sometimes. Hopefully more often you laugh with me. But I would say as long as you're laughing a little bit during these crazy times, that's a miracle and it's worth celebrating. Because my gosh, crazy times. I know that I've seen the news and read the information on how people's mental health is taking a major hit. Obviously, you guys know how I feel about mental illness, having struggled to my depths, to my very core, very often. And my gosh, horrible time last year. But I actually put a survey out on the Pastor with No Answers discussion page. You can find that link in the show notes. And I just wanted to ask some very straightforward, simple questions because I was just curious. You know, we have a good many people on that page. So about 68 people filled out the survey. Let me give you the results. First question was, as far as antidepressants are concerned, 25% of the people said, I currently take them and they help. 17% said, I used to take them, and 57% of people have never taken antidepressants. The second question was, as far as a therapist, 19% of the people that took the survey talk to one regularly. That's actually really cool. 1 out of 5 people talk to one regularly. 9% talks to one occasionally. 39% of the people have talked to one in the past but currently do not. And then 33% have never talked to a therapist. The third question, have you ever been hospitalized for mental illness? 16% of us said yes, including myself, and 83% said no. And then as far as suicide is concerned, 33% have never contemplated it, 42% have contemplated it, 15% began to make a plan but did not go through with it, 6% attempted, and 4% attempted more than once. And you'll hear more about my story as far as where I fell into that last year. But then lastly, how stigmatized is mental illness in America? This was very interesting. It was pretty much 50-50 between extremely stigmatized and moderately stigmatized. Only a small fraction said very little. So, if you didn't find that interesting, sorry for wasting your time. But, you know, you could have just fast forwarded a little bit when you saw or when you heard that I was going to give you the results of a survey on mental health. And do you just not care about people that struggle with mental health? Is that why you're frustrated? I'm joking around. I do have a question on the Pastor with No Answers discussion page that you can go and answer because it's really interesting. in the context of the last episode that was released on the existence of demons, I basically asked people, do you believe in a supernatural evil team made of Satan and his demons? And it's quite interesting, the results that we are getting. But for the show right now, we have Jack Hoey and Chip Judd, very, very different perspectives on prayer. And before that, me, Ellen Mauro, and John Mark McMillan continue our conversation on pornography and other things revolving sexuality. You guys have a great, great day and a great week. And email me sometime. It's in the show notes. Would love to hear from you. Have a good one.
It's just all so dark to me. Like, I almost have a hard time talking about it because it's so dark.
John, are you an empath? Do you know what Enneagram you are?
I'm a 4. I'm a 4 with a 3. But no, it's when I think about my kids and the way they're growing up and how available it all is, and like it just sort of puts me in I just sort of freeze. I'm like, I don't want to live in a world where this is a thing. And that doesn't make me righteous. Like, I'm a terrible human being at the same time, but it's like, I really just hate that this is a thing. I hate that I'm going to try my best to shield my kids from it. But at the same time, how do I shield them from it without also just sheltering them from the entire world? I don't know how to do it. Maybe that's honestly though. Maybe that's part of living in the world. Though the world is a very, very dangerous place. You can't protect people, but maybe you can teach them how to be strong. And maybe that's what we're supposed to do: is learn how to be strong, not shield ourselves. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, what's tough is the protecting your kids from it, I totally get that. But how do you do that aggressively and at the same time make sure your kid knows that what they're going through is very normal?
Yeah, totally.
Like when I first figured out masturbating, and that's
I love that you just said figured it out, like you'd been working at it for a while and you finally got good at it.
I mean, I'm telling you that, like, in middle school I was so clueless. I think it was the 7th grade. This will be uncomfortable, John. I haven't been podcasting with you that much, so I don't know if there's a level you don't want to go, but here we go. When I was in the 7th grade, like the boys would do like the hand motions, and I'm just totally in the dark. I'm like, what is going on? I remember this one kid actually like saying, "It's coming," and I was like, what the hell is coming? Like, I don't know what these guys are talking about. I just had no clue.
You probably thought he was talking about the rapture.
And so I remember as a middle schooler, I just started putting some things together, and so I just started to try, and I remember, like, as I went further and further, it started feeling better, and then it happened. And I mean, imagine having no idea that your body can even do that, having no clue, no one even taught you, because my parents had a really hard time talking to me about sex. So imagine that happening, and you're like, what in the world was that? What in the world was that? But I'm trying to think of, oh yeah. So I'm like, how did we get here? So
I think a lot of people are wondering that, Joe.
So when that happened, after that euphoric feeling, I immediately was thrusted into an addiction into as a young kid. So the porn was not accessible. Like, you could, sometimes my parents wouldn't be home, and you'd have 8 o'clock Playboy channel. Sometimes the squiggly lines line up, sort of thing. But I got to a place where I was like, I can't stop this, and I'm going to hell, because I was in a religious upbringing to where if you have sins on your heart, You die, you're going to hell. You can't be.
But
in
if you didn't know what it was,
sin.
how did you? If you didn't know what it was, how did you connect it with going to hell? Why did you think it was sinful?
I mean, after I did it for the first time, I got it. Like all of a sudden, everything made sense.
Oh, you knew that it was like a sexual. Okay.
Oh yeah. At that point, I was like, okay, now I understand sex. Like that's how I learned about.
You understand
sex.
why people do it, yeah.
Exactly, and like how it's done. Like so, put it this way: my parents taught me about sex by giving me a book that and they've apologized for this since, but it was a book. My mom said, "Hey, read this. Let us know if you have any questions." And how they describe sex was that the husband puts the penis into the vagina and it's comfortable. That's it. End of story. It's comfortable. So I seriously thought of sex as my mom and dad just snuggling, but being connected. Exactly. So when I did that for the first time, I was like, the light bulb went off. I understood it. But I constantly thought, because then I connected it to lust and the little bit of porn that I could access on Playboy, the squiggly lines and all that. I just want my sons to never get to a place where they think that their sexuality is going to send them to hell. Like I want them to always, well, obviously I don't want them to ever think any sin is going to send them to hell, not with how I believe in God, but I just don't want them to see it as a bad thing. Like if they have a hard time not staring at a girl in the cafeteria, I don't want them to feel guilty about it. I want to teach them how to respect and honor women. But I don't want them to connect guilt with their sexuality when they can't control what's happening with their body.
Yeah. As far as liberation go, if we're talking about respecting and honoring women, then you looking at pictures of naked women is not respecting or honoring them.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that. With that. So
then it is porn.
Sure, yeah. Yeah,
I gotcha. I finally gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So if I wasn't a Christian, and I feel like I see the world through Christian lens, some people would beg to differ, but I do see. I agree. So I agree with you. I agree that it is dishonoring to women to look at that. But if I wasn't a Christian, I think I would think along the lines of she is wanting you to.
Mm-hmm. So and you are appreciating her.
Am I stealing something from her that she's freely giving? Again, this isn't where I stand. I agree that I'm not honoring a woman if I'm staring at her naked body. I'm just saying that's the purpose of why she took that picture. So it's not.
You also assume consent there as well, which is dangerous.
I would think most Playboy models, and I say Playboy because I think it's the most tame.
I think that you're thinking of consent as being like a. Of course, it was my choice. I said yes, but there's a lot also going on to why women make those choices. And if they didn't have to make those choices, they wouldn't. So that's where consent gets a little broad, I think.
All right, so I have heard a lot of great teachings from Chip on prayer, and I'll also readily admit that I want to believe a lot of the things that Chip teaches about prayer, and I can't really find myself to be able to get there. Obviously, correct me if I am misquoting you in any way, but for example, you've made the observation that the church is obviously not praying enough. I think one time maybe you asked a crowd of 150 people, staff, who thinks that they are praying enough, and hardly no one raised their hands. Okay, well, that's an observation, and you connect to that, things not necessarily going as well in our lives or in the earth, but basically there's a correlation with how well things are going, and that sounds, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but a very concrete connection with prayer and things happening.
Right.
And I've even really pondered a lot about if that's how prayer works, and it seems like 30 people praying for a few hours more powerful than one person. Like, is prayer something? And I guess what always trips me up with this is that if God is our Father and he loves us, why would he act in our best interests according to how much we're praying? Like, I think of my kids, and I want what's best for them no matter what they're doing. No matter how much they talk to me, no matter how much they keep secret from me, I still want what's best, and I'm going to do everything in my power to do so. But
Okay, what you just said is not true
What?
about your kids. What you just said is not the truth.
What part? What part?
That you want the best for them no matter what they're doing.
Really?
Yep.
Explain that.
If you said to your son, he wants to go to a movie or he wants to do whatever, and you say, great, as long as you get the lawn mowed and your chores done, you're not going to say, go to the movie no matter what. You're not going to say, I don't care if you mow the grass.
Yeah, but I still want what's best for him.
But are you going to give it to him if he doesn't mow the grass?
No.
Guess what? Prayer's a responsibility. Why would
See,
God?
this is the stuff that I
Why?
like. And
Why would God reward? Why would God reward irresponsibility?
But so where do you draw the line, though? Let's say Joey Svendsen gets cancer. Is God going to answer my prayer if I fast and pray for 3 weeks, but not if I pray for 1 minute saying, God, I believe you can heal me. Please heal me. End of discussion. I'm not talking to you about this anymore because whatever happens is obviously you can stop it or you may not stop it. Like, what's the difference? Because it seems like with what you're saying, and again, it's obvious that I like what you say. I just can't get there. It sounds like I would be way better off if I fasted and prayed for a couple of months for God to take the cancer away so my family doesn't have to be without their dad and husband. I'd be way better off than just a simple prayer of, God, I know you can take this away. I'm asking you to take this away, but I trust you regardless, because I would tend to do the latter. Lord, please heal me.
But and you know, one of the things I think you got to be careful about with all this is like the fasting and the prayer. That's what you need to do. Well, you know, that's kind of like saying God is a genie in a lamp. And so what you have to do is rub the lamp the right way, and then God is obligated to do what you want. And I know that's not in any way what you're saying, and that's not what any of us believe. But I think that's one of the challenges with prayer is it's like we find ourselves searching for a formula, and the formula is so completely beside the point. You know, what I would say is fasting and prayer for 3 weeks versus a 1 minute prayer, whichever one is a better expression of true faith is the prayer God is eager to hear. And it doesn't, like, to me, one or the other, I could see either one being the best expression of that depending on who the person was.
But again, going to your basic thought is the concept of prayer in general. To go to specifics like that, we're talking like however many layers or clicks out instead of starting back at the beginning. For me, it's very simple. One of the words, Genesis chapter 1. I mean, like you know, are you saying prayer has anything to do with anything? Well, Matthew 16, Jesus says, you know, it's the Peter thing, you know, thou art the Christ, and you know, upon this rock I'm going to build my church and all that. But then he says a very interesting thing. I'm going to give you the keys of the kingdom. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Now, that's just one example. There's lots of places where it says, if my people, blank, blank, blank. So for me, it's like, okay, God, are we just like, is it arbitrary? Is it whatever? Now, is it complex? Is there mystery? Are there lots of areas where I've got the same questions you have?
Right.
Maybe not the same questions, but similar. But here's my fundamental point.
That was your way of saying maybe not the dumb
Yeah,
question.
exactly.
I hear you.
As soon as I grouped myself there, I thought, no, I don't want to stay there. But Genesis chapter 1, and to me, the church has never adequately unpacked this one simple thought. Genesis chapter 1, pretty early in the book, let's create man, let's create him in our image. I would assume that we can go all kinds of things, we're this, we're that, we think, we feel, whatever. But we also have responsibilities. If we're made in the image and likeness of God, we have a function, a joyful, wonderful, responsible, meaningful, purposeful, impactful reason for existing. And then he goes on to say, let's let them have dominion. I don't know how you get around that. Let them. Here's the Godhead, the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and they create man, and then they, the Trinity, says, let them rule the earth. And now, so God's just up in heaven watching. No. I believe it has always been God's intention to rule earth from heaven through us.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
and
but what's the connection to prayer? Prayer is one of the ramifications of that.
Right. And I feel that prayer is not arbitrary, but I don't know how it works, and I don't know if it's worth figuring out how it works, because I keep going back to concrete examples, and it's a fair assessment on your part to say.
Here's why it's not a good thing to do.
Why what's not a good thing to do?
To go to concrete examples. Here's why.
I'm still going to give it one.
We have no reference points. We have none, zero reference points for a community where the church has taken its place in prayer. We don't know what that community would look like.
And what does that mean? If Seacoast decided today we're going to have 20 people praying at all times, and we're going to have a schedule that basically there's 20 people praying for 1 hour, and it's going to be.
But you're going to the
clock.
Mechanics. To me, what's more important.
I don't see how we avoid mechanics.
All right, but hold it. But they've got to be rooted in the reality, and the reality is this: what the church needs to wake up to is we're not waiting on God; He's waiting on us, and He's waiting on us to dare to stand up and say, I have a much bigger role in the reality of this planet than I thought I did, and I need to figure out my part.
And see, here's the thing that I think is, in my experience, does God answer prayer in the terms of, Lord, I have a specific request, and does He ever answer those? I believe that He does. But I think my experience is that God mostly uses my prayer to change me, to shape my response to the things around me, to help me see my responsibility in maybe in another person's life that I'm praying for. Mm-hmm. So often things will come to mind like, I need to reach out to him or to her with this, Mm-hmm. And it's funny, we have my family, my extended family, a lot of ministry folks, and we have a day of prayer every month. So first Wednesday of the month, we send in requests. And then we actually, again, we've got my uncle has gone to pains to kind of make sure that 24 hours somebody's praying at all times, which whatever. But the point is, we share requests as an extended family every month, and we pray for each other.
Yeah, that's cool.
And what has that done? It's helped keep us connected in a really rich and powerful way. When somebody's struggling, they've got support that otherwise wouldn't be there and I think that gets to your point, Chip, is, I think I would really affirm what you said, that prayer is one of the things that helps us realize the responsibility that's been entrusted to us.
Mm-hmm. I actually think for me there is somewhat of a fear of living how you just described, Chip, and here's why. Is I don't want to be in a situation where I get a phone call from Priscilla and she says, Waylon got hit by a car and he's gone. And I have to think about whether or not I prayed enough protection over my family. I think I have part of why I can't go where you're going is fear, because I don't want to have to be in a situation where I'm like, could I have done more to protect my child? And wouldn't you say that's a fair that's a fair implication of what you're saying. And I get that there's mystery and there's things that you don't know and you have questions just like I have questions. But with what you're saying, isn't it fair for me to ask, what if I would have prayed more?
Yeah, and I think it's why we settle for cheesy, simple, dumb answers. In a word, what we're avoiding is responsibility. Now, I'm not saying that if something tragic were to happen to one of your family, that your one of your core initial responses should be, well, if I just prayed more. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is we have no idea. I mean, think about your side of this conversation. What you're basically saying is, I'm afraid that if you're right, what it implies. Well, here's the reality.
That's not the only reason, but fair enough.
But it would appear that's the whole church's attitude. Like, I don't want to open my heart to the possibility of what you're saying, so let's just stay in this que sera area where if I pray or if I don't pray, somehow what God wants to happen still happens. That's the ludicrous part to me.
Right.
It doesn't matter if we pray like we should. God's still in control. That doesn't work in any game anybody ever designed in any planet, and it's absurd.
So do you say...
It's insulting.
Do you end prayers with, if it's your will?
No, I don't believe in praying a prayer confidently until you know what his will is.
Well, but
your
I think
best guess.
I think there are some times when you come to God and you say, Lord, I am really torn up about this, and I have no idea how to pray. And I come to but I take comfort, Lord, in the idea that I do not know how to pray as I offer your Spirit intercedes for me, as it says in Romans, And so I've come to God with that prayer sometimes, I'm just coming to you, God. I don't know what to ask for. I don't know what,
Yeah.
So do we believe in demons, devil, Ephesians 6, a hierarchy of evil?
You asking me?
I'm asking anybody.
Sure.
So where are they in all of this?
Yeah.
So then what happens is, now if we're talking about somebody we care deeply about, we're not talking about just what's God's will. There's other wills involved, if you will. And again, my point being, is it fair of us to believe Scripture teaches the church has a responsibility, many responsibilities, has a role to play, and in that role there's responsibilities, one of which is to pray. So let's just say we agree to that. I think we probably would, right? Mm-hmm. That we agree that one of the responsibilities is prayer. Okay, the church has not taken that up to any degree that I think any of us would be proud of. To me, the breakdown from there is, okay, but everything that happens still is God's will. And I for the life of me, can't figure out how people make that jump.
Yeah.
Here's what I feel, in my opinion, gets everything you said off the railroad track is, do you think there's ever been a time in which, and obviously my kids are the most important thing in my life right now, so that's what everything revolves around.
Second to Priscilla, of course.
Yeah, totally. But we have jointly decided to put our kids first. So do you think there's ever been a time where a father never prayed for his family, ever, and yet his sweet daughter is in college and she's walking back to her dorm at pitch black night? She's in some crazy danger, and God says, that's my child. I'm going to protect her. Obviously, you would imagine there's been times like that, mm-hmm. and her dad didn't pray. So it's just, I'm literally scratching my head and figuratively scratching my head.
Yeah, but do we know Sister Sally over in China didn't pray for her? In other words, can you prove nobody prayed for her?
No,
all I'm saying is this. I'm more comfortable with the thought that there's a linkage than I am that God's just arbitrary.
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable with
But you don't understand the linkage.
I'm saying the linkage is occasionally unexplainable, but I also...
usually.
I would agree with that, but I also have a suspicion that when we get, in quotes, over there, it's going to make sense.
Yeah. Jack, do you feel... Because how you describe prayer, I definitely resonate with as far as it being more about us changing according to what's going on in our lives. How do you feel about Chip basically saying we have major responsibility with how things pan out in general.
Well, I think that a lot of what Chip's talking about is what I would frame as speculative theology. You're saying, here's something that the church has never lived up to, but I suspect that if we had, here's how it might look differently. You may be right. And I do think that there's scriptural warrant for the things that you're saying. But so I'll give you an example that came to mind as we've been discussing this. I had a company for about 15 years, and I remember at one point it just kind of haunted me, and I was praying about it. So Ephesians 2:10 says, we're created in Christ Jesus to do good works which God has prepared in advance for us to do. And what are they? How do I go through my days and not miss them? And one of the things that occurred to me, like this, I don't remember the setting. I don't know if I was praying or what, but standing before God one day and having him say, Jack, you're fine, whatever. You thought that was really important. If you'd needed more, I would have given you more. That's not, but what was really important about your time there? I brought, Fred into your life. Do you remember Fred? He worked in the insulating glass department for a couple of years. I brought him there so that you could have an impact in his life, and you never talked to him in 3 years. So I had to take him someplace else. That's why he left. Like the idea of here's this thing that God has prepared for me to do, that he's gifted me to do, and I miss it. So how do I not miss it? And so that really informed my prayer for you, and to some extent has informed my prayers ever since.
Yeah.
And a lot of what I believe about this, like the importance of having a responsive heart, and how walking through my days with a heart that is ready to, responsive to God, with ears that are ready to hear what the Spirit may be prompting me to do, and then being ready to act. How do I pray myself into a posture where that's my daily experience?
Yeah. I mean, Chip, if you suffered a tragic loss, would you connect that to prayer or lack of prayer? Would that be something that you would think about?
Let me just say one thing. See, here's what I think, Joey, is one of the things that about this is positive, and it is not guilt-inducing. God, this isn't a matter of beat yourself up because something bad happened, that maybe it was because you didn't pray enough. Because I think, again, there's forgiveness for that. We all fall short every day in every way, and we're forgiven.
Yeah, but grieving a child's loss just in general is
grieving
a lot
child's loss and feeling guilty about what you may not have fully done.
I don't see how
are two
we
different
don't
things.
with Chip's
All right, let me.
But my point kind of is, this is this belief about responsibility, in my mind, it should be a positive. It's like I don't want to miss this. Whatever is past is past. I can't go back and undo the past, but I can affect how I respond today and tomorrow. Anyway.
And I definitely would want it applied in that fashion. My deal, Joey, I think, now obviously I've not had to deal with that. I mean, I have some challenges and whatever. It's not that I've not ever had challenges in life. I would, you use different variations. Would I feel guilty? Would I think about it? I would probably think about it. But here would be my overall mindset. My overall mindset is we're in a war, and we're going to suffer casualties. And would I be happy that one of my kids was one of the casualties? No. But again, weird way to think, but here's the deal. I'd rather be on the front lines of the battle bleeding and losing people that matter to me than hiding somewhere.
So when you with that outlook, I can't help but to see a God that says, because we all believe that those casualties could have been stopped. So I just don't, and this falls into the mystery part, I know, but I don't.
But some of it
I can't beat the implication of, if God can stop everything, then he basically took the approach of, you didn't pray enough, so I'm just not going to do it. It wasn't he couldn't do it, and I know some open theists would believe that there's some things that God just couldn't prevent from happening. But in this territory of prayer, casualties, well, I thought God could stop anything. So if it's connected to
Yeah, but
prayer
what
in
do you-
any way,
what,
it's not.
What do you base that on?
What part?
That God could stop anything.
I mean, he created the universe, so
Right.
I think he could probably stop everything. Are you an open theist? Fall in line
no.
with Greg Boyd?
No, I mean, I know what you mean. I've not really studied it out, but I don't think I am. I'm not a deist either. But think out what you're saying. So God, because if you take what you just said, God could stop anything, then you have to come to the conclusion that anything that didn't get stopped, he wanted to happen.
Yeah, and this
or
is
or
why
that he's just not good.
right, and this is why the last conversation that the three of us had. This is why I am more comfortable with Lord. I believe, but
Yeah, but I'm not.
Who the
I'm not
heck
comfortable
knows
with that.
how any of this works?
I'm not comfortable with that because what does that say about God? What is he doing up there?
that sounds like Will Ferrell and Wedding Crashers.
Here's the other
She's
thing
always
is that,
doing
and what does
something.
he think about us?
Yeah,
I mean, like in my mind, part of the thing about didn't God prevent this? It's like okay, so what you think is that God is like the parent of a 2-year-old. And when a 2-year-old's loose, man, you got to be on it, right? Because you don't know what. So the 2-year-old thinks that he or she is free, but really their freedom is dramatically circumscribed because there's an adult making sure that nothing bad happens. And that's what we want. Okay, so God's to treat us all as 2-year-olds forever without us really. I don't think that's what we're created for. How can we exercise responsibility and dominion if
and you're in that gray area where I like to be, Jack, because what about when that 2-year-old's 10, 12, 15? Let me give you an example about some of these catastrophic things. So 7-year-old kids, school's right down the block, and walking home, somebody's driving, looking at their phone, and they run this kid over and kill him. Okay, what in the world? How does that fit into what I'm saying? All right, what I'm saying is this. Let's say we could somehow stop that and back up. Let's back up 20 years. In other words, here's how I forego, dodge, and don't participate at all in the immediacy of guilt. Well, I didn't pray enough. Don't even go there. Back up 20 years, and there was a prayer revival in our community. I mean, a real one. And little clusters here, there, and slowly but surely, there was this prayer revival in our community, and we began to bind and loose the right stuff. We began to live the things we were praying. And I agree very, very much with what Jack said, that one of the biggest things that happens when I pray is I change, not God. But the point is, we begin to live more directed, more purposeful, more spirit-led, more gently, more caring, more sharing. In other words, it affects the entire atmosphere. Now, 20 years of that, this same dude's driving down the road, but he's not on his phone because he's not stressed over his bills and he's not stressed over his job. He's at peace. Why? Because we're winning the war in the spirit. In other words, for me, it's not as direct. When you go to what if you had cancer? I'm talking more indirect than that. I'm talking about like from the First World War to now, the key to warfare is basically now it's commanding the seas, but also the air. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the skirmishes on the ground. If we win the battle up here, if Scripture would seem to indicate there's organized opposition to the work of God in every community. If we win the war there, and our pace is slower, we're more discerning, we're more understanding, and guess what? Traffic fatalities are down.
Yep.
Oh, because we stopped that particular accident. No, we changed the atmosphere.
Tell me how you think of this, because I'm trying to piece this together. Would you say that these two things are generally the same? So God tells us to make disciples of all men. I would say the primary way of doing that is to show love, be generous, and And he's given us hands to do that. So we can either say, okay, I will help my neighbor, or nope, I have the capacity to do it, but I won't. It's a tool that God has given us. We can use our hands to help our neighbor. He's not going to turn us into a robot to do so. Would you say that you can put prayer in that same practical sense that God said, look, this is a tool that I'm giving you. It works. If you don't do it, there's certain things that won't happen. In the same way of, if you don't help that older lady down the street with the tree that fell on her garage, it's not going to get helped. Mm-hmm. Same sort of thing.
Yeah, but I'd introduce a stronger word. It is, it's disobedience. It's not just you could and it's your choice. I think we treat some things that are we think are volitional or we have a choice when we really shouldn't see them that way. And again, the warfare mentality that I have embraces that I'm a soldier on assignment. And so all I'm doing is kind of changing the frame around it to then say, yes, I agree with everything you just said. The difference being we need to stop thinking like it's so much of a choice. Like, I have the means to help, but I don't feel like it.
Yeah.
And I think, again, for me, that word, here's an interesting thought for you. An observation, and I'm sure I read something that helped feed this, but I teach boundaries a lot. So this little trilogy is a monster that helps drive this whole area of thinking. 3 things that I believe always travel together, and they, in God's economy, God's kingdom, God's perspective, they always travel in the same order. And the order is responsibility, authority, and power. Responsibility, authority, and power. God assigns and defines responsibilities. He gives the appropriate level of authority to carry out those responsibilities, and then the power to enforce the authority. Now, here's the problem. We want power with no responsibility. We want God to show up and heal people, but we don't want to talk about whether or not we pray like we should. Because gosh, if those are connected, that's creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting way to frame it, because I think one of the things that it's easy to fall into, easy to second guess yourself on, is am I trying to manipulate God here?
Yeah.
And when you simply come and say, Lord, here's some stuff I want, without treating prayer in the fullness that it should have in your life, then I think it's fair to say maybe that is what you're doing.
Yeah. And again, forgive me if I sound, the last thing in the world I ever want to sound is arrogant or like I got it all figured out. But for me, I couldn't even tell you how little time in prayer I spend telling God what I want. It would be less than 10. Why? Because I just have such confidence in him. But what I am praying is the kind of stuff we're talking about. Like God, where is the church? Like, take an issue like sex trafficking. We're not going to figure that out. I mean, think about all the pieces of that puzzle. Male sexuality, greed, money, blah, 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 blah. Can you imagine, and I don't know if you regret something like this, but can you, the whole Epstein guy, I don't know if he killed himself or somebody killed him. Can you imagine who he could have damaged with what he knows? Can you imagine the powerful people on this planet right now that have been to that house and done things that every one of us in this room would shoot them for? And he went to his grave with all that information in his head. My point being, we're not going to win that in the natural. But what if the church said, you know what? I believe we have a responsibility to stop that, but we're not going to stop it on the fruit end. We're going to stop it on the root end. And we're going to start, because here's what would happen. You'd start to pray about sexual trafficking, and next thing you know, you'd be over here praying about greed or pornography or whatever. Because God would say, you think this is the issue. The issue's over here. And we're just not doing that. Here's the thing. The church has got it. Why am I into the church praying more? Because here's the deal. When you don't pray sufficiently, you throw prayer at the most pressing needs. And then all your conversations around God's answers to those prayers. If we prayed in abundance, surplus, you're praying enough to cover all that, but now you're moving into like where God can say, well, all right, I heard you, got that, I'm working, but I'd love for you to spend some time over here. And maybe a year later you realize, oh my gosh, this was his way of answering that.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand how we would even know if we're praying in surplus. I guess what you mean by that is praying non-specifically.
Well, I don't know. See, I think part of the thing though is, and the sex trafficking is a great example because it gets at things that communities can influence.
Yep.
And one of the things that just seems deeply wired into human beings is that we're made to be part of communities.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so the structure of the church is to enable the power of community in human lives to have, a God-led effect. So communal prayer, as we affirm together, the importance of this, and we all become alert to it, and people with different gifts have different things they realize they can do.
Right.
That unleashes the kind of societal impact that you're talking about, and it becomes self-reinforcing in many ways.
Yep.
So I don't know. I think that's an important part of it too.
Yeah. A metaphor that would be similar to that, Jack, is I felt one time I was getting ready to preach on prayer at my church, and I felt like God gave me the metaphor of voting. That every day you vote. I want God to be king. I want the devil or self to be king. And basically by default, you're voting. And I said, what if 51% of our community voted every day? I want God to be king. And what if, as they did that, this is kind of where you're going, Jack, how it is insidious in its pervasiveness. Mm-hmm. So you just pray that. I want God to be king over our community. And then maybe you pray that for a month, 6 months, or a year, and all of a sudden the revelation hits you. Remember, when you pray, God changes you. So you're praying, God, I want you to be king over the community. And then the thought hits you a month in, 2 months, 3 months. For God to be king over the community, probably needs to be king over me. And then your prayer changes. God, I want you to be king over me.
Yeah.
Guess what? We're going to have a revival. Mm-hmm. We're going to have a revival. Is it going to affect some of the issues we're talking about? Absolutely. Could it save that kid walking home from school from getting run over? I believe it could, indirectly. And that's where my issue is. We want to take those and say, okay, why did God let that happen? And the problem, if you will, is 5 clicks back. Why is that person so distracted? Why is that person under so much stress? See where I'm going? And could prayer change the atmosphere sufficiently to where some of the pressure we live under isn't what it used to be? And that's what I mean when I say we've never seen a community.
Yeah.
We've never seen a time in history. We've never seen a country, a city.
Yeah. Does that get too formulaic for you?
No. In fact, it's interesting. So the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. I mean, usually the way that we interpret that is, a really good ethical test for the caliber of your actions is whether, if somebody did what you're doing to them, whether that would be something you'd be pleased with. And that's true, but it's really incomplete. And, what I hear, what I think the golden rule is, God is saying, here's the way I design things. When you act in ways that are good and loving and true, you invite others to act in ways that are good and loving and true. You have an influence, and the community, the effect of more and more people building, working in that same direction, can change a society and change a culture. And Romans 8 talks about, creation is in groaning as in the birth of childbirth, waiting for the sons of God to be revealed.
Oh, my.
And when we walk in obedience and faithfulness, we reveal them to people who are hungry for just that, though they may not realize what they're hungry for.